Diagnosing the Economic Growth Policy of the Jae Myung administration. Good day, I am Professor Nam Yong Lee, and I also serve as chairman of the Bukak Forum, a fellowship of more than 2,000 Ph.D. level policy experts devoted to guiding and enlightening the grassroots citizens of the Republic of Korea in order to advance a sound liberal democracy and a sustainable free market economy. The current administration's economic growth policy, pursued under the banner of expansionary fiscal spending, has in reality degenerated into short-term populism aimed at political popularity rather than sustainable development. Fiscal resources are the lifeblood of a nation, yet the Jae Myung government treats them not as taxpayers' money, but as political advertising funds. The nationwide distribution of universal livelihood support grants may bring momentary satisfaction, but it is little more than an unproductive cash handout that fails to raise productivity or stimulate private investment. According to studies by the OECD and IMF, the fiscal multiplier of industrial and infrastructure investment exceeds 1.5, while that of cash transfers is below 0.3, practically negligible. In other words, even if the government injects trillions of won in taxpayer money, economic growth remains minimal, while inflationary pressure intensifies. From an international standpoint, Korea's fiscal management ranks low in quality. The global standard emphasizes investment-oriented fiscal policy in which public finance complements private innovation rather than replaces it. The United States, Germany, and Japan all pursue fiscal expansion that enhances productivity through tax reform and deregulation, thereby empowering private enterprise to lead growth. The Lee administration, however, is taking the opposite path. Regulatory reform has stalled, corporate taxes have risen again, and new burdens, including carbon levies, labor regulations, and strengthened union privileges, have made Korea's business environment increasingly rigid. As a result, foreign direct investment, FDI, in the first half of 2025 fell by 18% year-on-year, while the number of domestic firms relocating overseas reached a record high. Korea is transforming from a nation friendly to enterprise into a country from which enterprises flee. The essence of economic growth lies in improving private sector productivity and expanding business investment. Yet the government's actions consist largely of distributing cash and tightening controls. Freezing public utility rates, intervening in wage policies, enforcing profit-sharing mandates, and regulating platform industries all undermine market efficiency. Consequently, Korea's ranking in the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business Index has declined for 5 consecutive years, and its regulatory burden remains 1.8 times higher than the OECD average. Under such conditions, even aggressive fiscal expansion cannot restore a growth rate of 3%. An even graver concern is that the cost of fiscal expansion ultimately falls on the people. National debt has surged from 44% of GDP in 2021 to 58% in 2025, an increase equivalent to nearly 20 million won of additional debt per citizen. The government insists that fiscal soundness remains intact, but international credit rating agencies have already issued warnings. Unrestrained fiscal expansion leads inevitably to credit downgrades, higher bond yields, and increased borrowing costs for the private sector, a vicious cycle characteristic of populist fiscal governance. In contrast, nations recognized as world best practice cases sustain growth even in crisis by adjusting the direction of spending rather than merely its volume. Germany, for instance, pursued an industrial expansionary fiscal policy focused on digital infrastructure and R&D investment, while Japan shifted policy emphasis from job preservation to productivity enhancement. Korea, by comparison, remains trapped in politically motivated welfare spending and indiscriminate cash transfers, a form of anesthetic growth that numbs short-term pain but erodes long-term potential. Ultimately, The Lee Jae Myung administration's economic strategy represents a dangerous illusion, a stimulus without substance that risks both corporate vitality and national competitiveness. True growth policy does not mean distributing tax money, it means cultivating enterprises capable of generating tax revenue through innovation and investment, suppressing private investment, expanding regulation, rejecting labour market flexibility, and relying solely on fiscal stimulus reveal a fundamental misunderstanding of economics. Korea is drifting toward a fiscal populism state where government spending serves political survival rather than national prosperity. Economic growth is not a matter of how money is spent, but how wealth is created. If the government truly wishes to improve the lives of its people, it must abandon the temptation to buy votes with taxes and instead restore the foundations of a free market economy, an environment in which companies can invest freely and citizens can work autonomously. That is the global standard, the world's best practice, and the only genuine path to sustainable economic growth. Thank you very much.